So what on earth is hyperlexia? The word itself comes from the Greek hyper, meaning over, and lexis, meaning diction or words. So hyperlexia, too many words? Over wordiness? Let's discuss. Hi everyone, if you're new to my channel, I am Sam and I make videos about autism and neurodiversity right here on YouTube every single week. Today we'll be talking about hyperlexia, which is generally used to refer to children who have a precocious or early ability to read, and sometimes also write way earlier than expected and at a very advanced level compared to their peers. These early and self-taught reading and writing skills can appear as early as 18 months to 2 years of age. So in the context of this condition, we would consider advanced reading to be reading fluently before the age of about 4 or 5. Basically, before you start school, you can already read. So I just want to say, as always, if you are concerned about your child or your child's development, please seek medical or professional help. I am by no means an expert on hyperlexia and reading in young children at all. This is just my experience of reading early and my observations of watching my own son develop early reading skills as well. Now, I have not been diagnosed with hyperlexia, but I am autistic and I was definitely reading by the age of about 4. I don't have much of a record before that. My parents don't really remember. Younger child struggles. But here is an example of my writing when I was, I think, 4, about to turn 5, and my reading I know was on a similarly advanced level. As you can see, my handwriting is very clear, and there are no spelling mistakes and some quite advanced vocabulary. In my first year at primary school, I was reading short stories fluently, which was actually noted but without much interest in my school reports. But I remember 2 things distinctly from that time. Number 1, I was desperately, completely and utterly confused by phonics, and any attempt to actually teach me language using phonics. And especially when you consider the English language, where letters can be pronounced a variety of different ways, it just didn't make sense to me to be learning a whole separate alphabet of Abbuka when it's like, well, that's not the noise they make anyway all the time. And you know, I still don't really understand how phonics helps, but clearly I myself learnt to read atypically. But now that I know that I'm hyperlexic, I can understand why I was so confused by that. More on that later. Number 2, I was also very confused by why everyone else was reading such simple books at a low level. I think they were the ones that were sort of like, look, car, look, or something. They had 3 words on each page. Anyway, I had no idea that I was especially advanced or that they were actually average level readers for that age. So that was when I kind of started attributing a lot of my autistic traits to actually just being explained by, well, you're just highly intelligent. And probably a lot of my teachers throughout my childhood and adolescence also did the same. Intelligence and all that is a really interesting topic for another time, but high IQ, and I'm talking top 1 or 2% of the population, is highly correlated with neurodivergency because a lot of IQ tests are about pattern recognition. But that's another topic for another time. Let's just say that I personally put everything down to IQ until I learned better that IQ is flawed in a variety of different ways, and is essentially just a measure of how good you are at IQ tests, you know. So my language ability has always been very high. I rarely made or make spelling mistakes, unlike speech mistakes, which I make all the time, because I look at a word and it looks right or it looks wrong. And I think I would make a very good proofreader because of this. And so I've always been somewhat into writing. It's a cliche that I've always wanted to write a book, but I have. And I'm good with words, and that's something that helps me out here on YouTube because I script everything in advance. And my writing is much better than my spontaneous speech, and so people watch videos which are highly edited and scripted, and they think, well, you're really good at talking, Sam. And actually, if I have to make things up on the spot, it doesn't go so well. You might think I'm talking to you right now, but what I am actually doing is reading my writing aloud. And for me, reading my writing aloud is very different from formulating ideas through speech, which is a little bit harder for me. Anyway, even though I don't know much about my own hyperlexic superhero origin story, I do have a son who is coming up to 3 years old, and I can already see that he is absolutely hyperlexic like I was. So this became noticeable just around when he turned 2, I think, and he basically at that point began an intense and slightly obsessive study of Dr. Seuss's ABCs. It was the only thing he'd read for weeks. And during this time he would be absolutely fascinated by letters and read it over and over and over. eventually picking out letters in the things around him, so the letters on the brand name of the fridge and that sort of thing. And I remember the first time that he did that, he actually pointed to my t-shirt which had words on it, and he pointed to the letter Q and he just goes, "Cool." And you know, this was younger than age 2 actually, and I think if I hadn't already been sitting down, I probably would have fallen off my seat. But it was really interesting, you know, we could see him learning his ABCs, and even though he wasn't great at pronunciation and actually didn't speak much up until the age of 2, he babbled and he said some things. But it was so interesting to see him learning his ABCs, and even though he wasn't great at pronunciation, he knew what the letters were from reading them. And it actually took a lot longer to develop the skill of saying the letters rather than identifying the letters. And I don't think he actually even said mama until he was like 2 and a bit, maybe. So by 2.5 it became obvious that he was reading some words, but I said this to his teachers at nursery and they said no, he probably just remembers it. It was definitely around 2 years and 9 months that I could see him definitely recognizing words spontaneously out of context. Things like his name, the word happy, as in happy birthday or happy Easter, reading titles of his favourite books and pointing to the words while he does it rather than pointing to the picture or, you know, remembering it. And he started also trying to read words that he doesn't know. So, for example, he has this dinosaur encyclopedia that he loves, and he pointed to the word extinct in it, and he was a bit like excavator? So he's recognizing word parts, which is really interesting as well. So the inner psychologist in me just loves parenting during this developmental phases, and it's just fascinating to watch someone acquire language and reading like this. Anyway, so there is definitely and completely a link between hyperlexia and autism. Not all autistics are hyperlexic and not all hyperlexics are autistic, but there is some overlap, although we don't really know to what extent it really overlaps. Some people say that maybe as many as 80% of hyperlexics also are autistic, but that figure is a bit, you know, wishy-washy. We don't really know. Some researchers have proposed subtypes, and they're kind of arguing about what the different types are, but basically, like, the most known one, type 1, is hyperlexia without autism, which is basically just learning to read really early. And basically that's that. Typically their peers catch up to them, or they are just sort of intelligent, and there's nothing really more about the hyperlexia. Now type 2 is hyperlexia and autism together, which looking back that I know that I have. And type 3 is a bit dodgy really, because they call it hyperlexic with autism-like symptoms, and which go away after time. And I just think, did they though, or did they just learn how to mask? And the thing about viewing autism from a developmental delay point of view is that delays can be caught up with, and at some point there might not be a difference or a delay anymore, but the person is still autistic. Which is why I don't think of autism really as a delay, even though you can have delays in childhood, because when you start looking at autistic adults and neurotypical adults, there is still a distinct difference. So it kind of sounds like they are describing an observed phenomenon, which is heavily masking autistics, going through the process of learning how to mask. And especially when they have hyperlexia and potentially a really good command of language, that might be easier for them to mask than for other autistics. So I'm kind of aware that I'm making it sound that hyperlexia is this wonderful, fantastic, amazing thing, and we've all got superpowers and we're amazing, and that's partly true. But that's not the whole story. But for me it is very rewarding, as I do have a love of language, and not just English but learning other languages. And I feel that hyperlexia has helped me with that, especially when it comes to reading and recognizing other languages. Many autistic people are very interested in word roots, have extremely good language skills, maybe they're even linguistic savants, and they can speak or perhaps write in multiple languages. And it has been suggested that hyperlexia is perhaps the neurological opposite of dyslexia, which is also neurologically based. However, there could be some downsides to having hyperlexia. So differences in information processing might prioritize certain sensory input and certain ways of processing data. That's not a bad thing, it might just be a different thing. So for example, hyperlexics might be very good at reading and recognizing symbols visually, but less good at understanding spoken language. I have not been diagnosed with this, but I strongly suspect that I have auditory processing disorder to some extent. I had my hearing tested multiple times as a child and adolescent because I couldn't do language listening exercises. It was like I couldn't hear it properly. And I've had my hearing tested, I have perfect hearing, I have very sensitive hearing. So I've come to the conclusion now, especially after getting my autism diagnosis, that Anything that comes in through my ears just takes me a little bit longer to get. Sometimes someone will say something and I'll say, what? But then by the time they've already started speaking again, I go, oh, okay. It just takes me a little bit longer to process things that I hear as opposed to things that I see, which I process almost instantly. You might find other hyperlexics, especially autistic ones, who process language through the etymology, rather than the semantics. And what I mean by that is that they will be taking the word hyperlexic, it's built from other words, so the meaning is built from language blocks, rather than automatically from the word or the context. So hyperlexia might present in a way where somebody has an incredible ability to recognize words. They might have a memory that has the dictionary in it, but they don't necessarily understand everything they read or get the deeper meaning behind it. And this could look like maybe comprehension delays in childhood, or perhaps an overly literal reading of whatever passage they're reading. Please let me know if you are hyperlexic and autistic, or hyperlexic and not autistic, or you grew out of your autism. Could happen. Please let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and click like and subscribe and all that jazz. Also, maybe head over to Instagram to follow me there. I am at YoSamdySam, and I'll see you next time. Bye.